Welcome, everybody, to this training event called Influencing Tomorrow, which is all about engaging parliamentary candidates before the next election on the issues that we're working on, which for results is international development and global poverty, and for hope for the future is climate change and nature. And we will introduce ourselves a little bit more than that in just a second. So, firstly, I just want to mention a couple of housekeeping things, if that's okay. We're recording this session. We're going to be hopefully having it available to share for people who missed it. So if you're not comfortable with being in the video, please feel free just to turn your video off. We're going to run through a few slides, which hopefully will be self-explanatory. But if you have something that you don't understand, just put a question in the chat. We'll keep sort of substantive questions to the end, if that's okay. We've turned on closed captions in case that's useful for anybody, and you can turn that on and off using the Zoom menu bar. I think that's all I wanted to say before we actually get into it. So let's start. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Naveed Chowdhury. I'm the head of campaigns at Results UK.
And I'm Apar Maga, and I'm a policy and engagement officer at Hope for the Future. Might be helpful to show the slide.
Oh my goodness!
Little slide that's got our faces on.
That was me not turning the slides on.
Although I guess you can see what we look like.
We just practiced that, and I got it wrong straight away.
It's easy to forget.
There we go. You should be able to see a slide. That's us. There you go. And so that's, yeah, we're called Influencing Tomorrow is what we're calling it. And I'll start with just introducing Results UK for those of you who don't know who we are. We work on international development or global poverty, depending on how you conceptualize it. We have both a staff office and we have volunteers all around the country who use their voice to influence political decisions that will bring an end to poverty. And you can see there our main tactics are about influencing politicians, raising awareness in public, but also building relationships with decision makers. And I will hand over to Apar to introduce Hope for the Future.
So Hope for the Future are a democratic engagement and climate communications charity, which sounds kind of technical, but we've got over 10 years of experience in this sector, and the kind of aim of the organization is to upskill people around the UK and empower them to engage with their local politicians on climate policy. And we do this through like a range of different methods, and this includes training sessions. We run like free monthly training sessions, one-to-one tailored support for constituents, events, like helping people draft letters, facilitating any politician meetings, all of that kind of stuff. And you can find out more about the organization and our work by scanning the QR code or by really just typing in Hope for the Future. Yeah. So this slide is just a quick outline of the session to introduce what will be coming later. So we'll start off with an introduction, go on to talking about a relationship-based approach, the importance of researching your politician, finding common ground, researching your issue and like how important that is, smart asks, the conversation and preparing to meet with your PPC, which we will also explain what that means in a coming slide. Election do's and don'ts, and at the end there will be questions and answers. So this slide leads on really nicely. So what is a PPC and why should you engage with them? So a PPC is a prospective parliamentary candidate, and they are the people who will be standing in the general election, and that might include your current MP if they are standing again. So yeah, we're getting a lot closer now to a general election, although there's a bit of mystery about when it will be. And so what this means is that your PPC might be more able to listen now, because when the date is announced, they might be more busy campaigning. So meeting with them before means that you can, before they're in office, if they get into office, means that you can really get to know them and build a relationship with them, and it can move issues that are important to you higher up their agenda. And political parties have already selected their candidates for some seats, but not every seat has a full set of prospective candidates yet. So if you look and you can't see like a full list of everyone, then that will be why. So I think this is another thing that's like really helpful to think about when you're looking to engage with your PPC, what motivates them. And this also helps inform you in terms of what ask to put in front of them, what to request and how to frame it, by really thinking about what motivates them. Because for some people, they might be standing because they want to gain improved knowledge and understanding. I think some people, they like the good publicity. So if you know that your PPC really likes good publicity, maybe you invite them to an event that you're doing if you're part of a local group or something. Or if you run a hustings event, again, that's another good opportunity. Other motivations could be a constituency mandate. So if you come to them, then that would give them a reason when they're elected to act about it, or to use it as a sort of campaign point, because that would be that constituency mandate. And the other point would be leaving a legacy of public service. So Hope for the Future really advocate for using a relationship-based approach when you talk to your local politicians and your PPCs. It's kind of the bedrock of Hope for the Future. So we're going to go into what that really means. So what that means is we're trying to find that sweet spot where meaningful collaboration can happen between the two parties. So if you're too concerned about building up your relationship with your PPC, then this can really lead to us not progressing towards our goals. And if you're on the other end and you're maybe too concerned with your goals, it can lead you to really making demands of your PPC and not building a rapport with them. And this can lead to a stalemate with no actions agreed. So instead, we want to build engagements that are really balanced and they allow for this like meaningful collaboration to occur. So I'm going to show you kind of what that looks like in practice. So rather than blaming others and making demands, so I'm going to read this out now. I have seen no action from the disgraceful local MP on the cost of energy. Do you agree to correct this if you get into office? If you get into office, if you don't, it would be shameful and show that you don't care about residents and their children and are just lining your own pockets like the rest. So while the sentiment behind that, so true, but it's not always effective in really getting what you want from your PPC. So in this example, there's not really a request. There's not anything. It doesn't allow for meaningful conversational collaboration to happen there, because you're kind of just backing someone into a corner. And while, the sentiment behind it and the person's emotions, they might be so valid, there's a way to frame it that can lead to a more fruitful outcome, which is the next slide. So we, as an organization, we advocate for people to focus on more positive solutions. So this is a very basic framework that you can use. So it starts off with the observation: the cost of energy remains high, with gas being 60% more expensive than 2 years ago and electricity 40% more expensive. And your feelings, that can be quite personal. So I'm concerned about the ability of myself and neighbours to afford to heat their homes this winter, as well as the impact that this has on children in the area. Then the needs and values section. It is vital that people can afford to heat their homes and that children don't suffer because of the high cost. And lastly, the actual request. Will you sign my pledge to take action to support installation upgrades, decreasing the financial burden and environmental impact of heating homes? So that gives them, that's something tangible that they would be able to do. And we will also go into other example actions later on that you can present to them. So something that can be really helpful as well to know what kind of ask to put in front of your PPC is by researching them to know what kind of place that they're coming from, because you're also coming from a place, you've got your own experiences that shaped you, and what is that same thing for them? And that helps to know how you're going to frame stuff in conversation with them. This normally gets some laughs, but designing a presentation without your audience in mind is like writing a love letter and addressing it to whom it may concern. And the joke we normally make is that we're not telling you to write a love letter to your PPC. But instead, what we're really advocating for is for you to make any engagement as personal as you can. You can really try to build common ground with them and find things that you have in common and things that you can both relate to, and find those areas of agreement and build upon them. I won't dwell on this slide too much, but researching your PPC is different to researching your MP if it's not your MP, if your MP isn't standing again, basically. So places that we would recommend looking to research include local press, social media, their party manifesto, and their website. And normally their website will also have their email address on it. And depending on what their work and political history is, you might also find other sources to look. A lot of PPCs might be councillors or like local activists. So you might, like I mentioned, find stuff in local press or just stuff that's online about things that they've done. Maybe they attended an event a long time ago and there's a Facebook event still up. Tools like Who Can I Vote For can be really incredibly useful, but they might not paint a full picture. And like I mentioned before, all of the candidates in every seat haven't been announced yet. So even when I look up the seats in the PPCs for my candidate, they're not all listed. So considering the upcoming election, these are just some things that are helpful to think about. So is your MP standing at the next election? How many candidates have been announced so far? Who are they? The safety of the seat. So the reason that I mentioned the safety of the seat is because maybe if your MP is, if your constituency is like a safe seat for an MP, they might be really comfortable there. And so you might not be very successful if you're trying to get them to do a really big ask. But on the other hand, if your seat is like really marginal, then you might be really successful in getting different PPCs to support you. Yeah. What else have we got? Who is their strongest opposition? This one could be really important as well. You might think about as well, what are their campaign promises and things that their strongest opposition has focused on, and what are local issues that might be campaigned on. This is a really important one because I think so many elections, and it really depends on your seat and the specific issues that are important to residents as well. So if, for instance, the cost of energy is like a really big thing, like even bigger than it is in other areas where you live, then that could be like a key issue. And remember that the upcoming election will significantly impact politicians' time, and really assess how active campaigning they are doing to best decide what follow-up action you ask of them and how ambitious that action is. I've spoken for a long time, but I think it is coming to an end soon. So in terms of a good way to engage your PPCs, that is a hustings event. So you can attend a hustings event, but you can also host one yourself. So these are just some things to consider when if you're hosting an event, which would be picking a venue, contacting the candidates, choosing an independent chair, advertising your hustings, and choosing your questions and the format. If you are planning to hold a climate-focused hustings and you want any sort of support, then do get in touch with us at Hope for the Future, because we offer loads of support for you if that is the case. And a great hustings would be easy for candidates to attend and difficult for them not to, because again, the publicity is a really good opportunity. Yeah. Still me. So finding common ground, that is something that I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, I believe. So common ground it's kind of what the phrase suggests. It's as you would with any person, try and build your relationship from a place of like shared experience or understanding. So common ground can be loads of different things. They can be really small personal things that connect you both to the local area, but they could also be alignment on major policy issues. So for example, you might find from your research in local press or social media that the PPC that you want to speak to really enjoys cycling, and you do too. And this would be a great place to start the conversation from. And you might even think of a request to do with that as well. But you might not. That's fine too. I'm now finally going to pass over to Naveed.
Thanks, Apar. So we said we'll take questions at the end, but if anyone's got any questions of clarification or anything that didn't make sense so far, just before I take over, do put any questions in the chat. We'll keep an eye out for that. But as I say, substantive questions we'll take at the end. For those of you from who have been campaigning with results, you'll probably have heard a lot of similarities from Hope for the Future's approach and ours. And regardless of the issue you're working on, a lot of these approaches are similar, which is really one of the reasons we've teamed up. Some of the issues that you're working on will be well within your area of knowledge. You may be a particular expert on certain aspects of climate change or local environmental action, but for others of us, we are working on issues that can be quite complex, particularly some of the global issues that we work on. And you can see here on this slide a couple of examples regarding to vaccinations and fighting infectious diseases like HIV, TB, tuberculosis, and malaria. These are things that we think are really important and would like people to raise with their candidates if they want to and are interested in those things. And we, similarly to Hope for the Future, we make sure that you have all the information that you want. So, some people will do their own research, but do, come to organizations like us for the information that we think can be helpful to raise with candidates. So this is just a kind of reminder of that. The issues that you care about, of course, are the issues that you care about. But we can help. One of the important things I think is people often get a bit, I don't know, politicians have this kind of mystique, don't they, that they're important and they know lots of stuff because they're quite good at talking. But in actual fact, most of them won't know as much as you do about the issues because you're passionate about them. You know a bit about them. They might know some things about some aspects that you don't, but that's okay. The chances are that this meeting or these interactions that you have with them in the run-up to the election could be the start of a learning journey for them, and could build their engagement with issue in the longer term. And both organisations have got quite a lot of examples of that, I think. So again, this really is about the relationship building again, I think, just from a slightly different perspective. I think as charities, we don't want to be party political, but we recognise they all have their political approaches. But there are some things that can transcend party politics. A sustainable future, fewer children dying from preventable diseases. These sound like things that people can agree with across party, and certainly in the experience of results, we work with people of all political parties on these issues. It's not just one party. So, find out what they think. It's either going to be they'll hold the party line, or if it's a bit off-piste, they'll say something personal. Kind of don't know until you try. Right, we're going to move into just a quick, this is a bit of jargon, I suppose, but it is kind of useful, what we call smart asks. That sounds rude almost, isn't it? I hope I said that right. So what that is, it's an acronym, one of these terms of art. You may have come across it. If you haven't, it stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timed, or time bound, sometimes people say. So these are, if you want somebody to do something, they kind of want to know what exactly it is, when by, and is it something that they're actually able to do? Is it in their role? Is it in their scope of what they can achieve? So that's why this is important. How you use it is very much up to you, because some interactions will be about how you just start the conversation with somebody. They might be a long way down the road from coming on board on that issue, but for others, they're ready to be asked for something specific, and that's why this matters. So we've got a couple of examples here. This one, if you're interested in climate finance, will you put more money into climate finance? Well, it's not very specific, but also they probably won't be in a position to say yes, because their party will have all of the answers on their overall economic policy. But a smart ask might be, this is a very specific example, probably more specific than you might want to go. If you're elected, would you meet or communicate with the new Minister of State on climate, the environment and energy, and ask them to discuss the benefits of an increased climate finance budget? They may not be able to say what the budget will be, but they may be able to commit to actually having a meeting. Would you submit an oral question in Parliament? Or would you actually go further and actually try and table a Westminster Hall debate on the need for something very specific, and in this case, climate risk insurance? And you don't need to know what that actually is. So this is just an example of how specific you can go on these issues if it feels like that's the right thing to do. And we can chat about that at the end. We've just got, these are not exclusive, but we've got some suggestions of things that are maybe more appropriate asks of a sitting MP. When I say sitting MP, I mean one sitting at the moment. As soon as the election is called, they're all they lose their post essentially, and they're all prospective parliamentary candidates. But whilst they're MPs, you can ask them to table a written question, put in for a debate, speak in debate, write or speak to the minister, read a briefing, or even join a parliamentary group. There's many parliamentary groups, and quite a lot on the issues that we're concerned about. You probably know about a few already. For the PPCs, it's a bit different, because obviously they won't be able to do those parliamentary things, but they will be able to read up on the topic. They will be able to think about their party apparatus and what routes they've got for raising the issue within their party structures. And they may be interested in making media statements. And I would suggest that in the run-up to election, they'll be very interested in making media statements. And they may even sign a pledge. And then one other thing that's kind of sometimes helpful, because you don't necessarily know the approach of the person that you're going to be talking to. PPCs are a very varied bunch, and it might be useful to have alternative arguments. Now, what arguments you're prepared to use is very much up to you and what your values are. But here's an example from our work, which is around vaccinating children. So for us, it's really important. Well, the reason we work on it is because it reduces child deaths, it reduces poverty, it reduces the burdens of disease. And these are all things that our charity is set up to fight. But for other people, there might be alternative arguments that are equally or more important. So, for example, that would reduce burdens on the economy and help economies grow. That can be really important as well in overcoming poverty. And a bit of self-interest, of course, it can stop diseases spreading globally. And with COVID behind us, I think we all understand that one pretty well. An example from the climate area, home insulation obviously reduces reliance on fossil fuels. You can argue that it improves health. It's about addressing heat inequality and justice issues. And again, there are economic arguments in terms of more money for the local economy. I think I've dived into Apar's slides by accident. So I'm going to leave that one on screen in case I've missed anything and then hand back to her.
Thank you. That's more than okay. I feel like you pretty much covered it, but I like to think of it kind of like maybe positive side effects. It might not be the main reason that you're advocating for a specific policy, but they're things that might be important to your PPC. So they're definitely things to keep in mind. You might find out from your research that your PPC is really passionate about like the local economy. So if you can make arguments that relate what you're talking about to that, then that's always a good place to start from. So this part of the session is more on the practical side of things in terms of what the actual meeting with your PPC could be like and how to prepare for that. So we at Hope for the Future, we always really encourage people to have an agenda when you have a meeting that's in the books, and some really basic things to include in an agenda. Some basic things to include in an agenda would be an introduction, an explanation of your issue that you've got from your research, smart asks, and a conclusion to really make sure that you leave with a commitment. And planning a meeting agenda, it really helps you to structure how you'd like your conversation to go in advance. But you really also have to be flexible that it might not go how you want it to go, or it might not go how you expected it to at the start. But if you feel like it's gone in a positive direction, then you can raise that smart ask that you came up with before to them. And you can also scale it down depending on how you feel the meeting is going. You know, you could maybe get them to agree to something as small as another meeting, or I've seen it done really well, but where people have gotten PPCs or local politicians to agree to just read something. I think that can be really useful as well, because it's important to know that PPCs don't know everything. Yeah. So at the start of your meeting, it's really important to introduce yourself and the topic that you want to discuss. So I'm gonna read this out, get into my character again. I want to discuss the issue of poorly insulated housing in our area. That is the what. You've introduced your issue there. And then there's the why. So why is that issue important to you? I am concerned that there is no rigid plan to increase the energy efficiency of our homes, risking continued carbon emissions in our local area, which negatively impacts the local climate and air quality, and which will result in higher energy costs. And then how? Our local group called Keep Suffolk Warm have invited you and all of the other PPCs to speak at a hustings event. We would like to discuss your plan in regards to energy efficiency measures and the cost of energy. So during your meeting, it's really important to listen to what they have to say and their thoughts and opinions, and think about what motivates them, you know, thinking about that slide that was at the start. So why are they standing for election? What is important to them? You know, this kind of stuff might come up in your research as well. Like if you find out someone has been really passionate about local issues their whole career, then that would be something important to know when you're going into a meeting with them. And also emphasize the co-benefits of taking action on your issue. And again, these co-benefits will come out from your research as well. And at the end of the meeting, you can raise your smart ask and you can agree on next steps. I'm now going to hand over back to Naveed.
Back to me again. So we're racing through all of this. So I hope there'll be plenty of time for questions and discussion. We've got a few kind of suggested do's and don'ts. There's no hard and fast rules, but there are some things that is definitely better to do. See in the picture there, some of our volunteers meeting Caroline Lucas. It was all very exciting. Okay, so it kind of stands to reason that one should keep the conversation polite and respectful. nobody has impact and influence by putting people's backs up. And I think this is really important in political debate, particularly as we hear, I don't know how you feel, but lots of people taking more extreme positions and being more vocal these days and trolling each other, and it feels very uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people feel put off by that. And so when you find yourself not agreeing with somebody, I think it's really important to recognize that that's just the way it is. And when people see you accepting that you can agree to differ and still look for common ground, that makes a whole different relationship. So again, it goes back to the relationship building slides that Apar was talking about a little bit earlier on. But either way, whether you agree with them or not, the fact is you're a concerned constituent. And if they get elected, they know that there's people in that constituency who take that view, and they have to respond to that. It will be their job. So it's kind of important just to accept that they might not start off, at least, by being on your side. Then there's a few don'ts. Obviously, for yourself, you can do what you like, but if you are going to be representing the views of a charity, such as Results, it's different than if you're going, you're just talking about your own personal political views. It's kind of important not to make party political statements or talk about how you personally will vote. That's not really the way what this meeting is about, or this hustings is about, or this letter is about. It's about raising the issue and not making, as I said earlier, not really making the assumption that you have to be of a political party to care about that. There's probably going to be, I think, some differences of opinion about this. So looking forward to having the discussion on this a little bit later. And another thing in terms of fairness, I think it is all important to try and engage all the candidates, particularly the main parties, all the ones you can reach in your constituency. If some don't attend, fine, but then they can't complain that they weren't invited along. That can cause trouble. Mostly everything is fine though, and they just don't show. So we've got tons of time, but we thought we'd talk to you about some potential further support just quickly. So here you can see a slide from the Results website. If you're already in contact with the Results, you probably know how to get hold of us. If you haven't yet signed up to our newsletter, this little box is at the bottom of our homepage, and you can just sign up today. And I think the next slide is something very similar for Hope for the Future.
Yes, so if you're interested in support from Hope for the Future, then you can sign up for one-to-one tailored support on engaging with your PPCs, MPs, councillors, and any other local politician that you can name on the Hope for the Future website. There's a little form on there. And we also have access to an online portal which has lots of free video and written resources, which the link to will be sent in the follow-up email, along with these slides and all the other information. So don't worry about trying to write everything down now. I also wanted to clarify, because I realized I went through some of the slides a bit fast, but what I meant when I said why it's important to research, and there were the different points, and I said about researching how marginal the seat is. I realized I went through that really quickly, but all I meant by that is if maybe the seat is like really marginal, then there might be different, you might be able to get your PPCs to agree to maybe more like larger asks. And this, I think it's just helpful to think about the scale of your ask, really. Yeah, but I think we can probably move on from that. Should we go into questions?
So we've got tons of time for questions, and I think probably what I'll do at this point is just unshare my screen, just so we can see each other a bit better. There we go. So there's a lot, we've covered a lot of ground quite quickly, and so no question is a bad question. This isn't obvious to everybody. Most people don't engage with politicians in a direct way, and so for some people this might seem like an unfamiliar activity. And for others, you kind of probably know a lot more than I do. But for all that, we've all got our own perspective on it. So let's just share some ideas, really. You can either put your question into the chat for either Apara or myself, or for anyone to respond to, really. But I notice, or you can just unmute and ask your question, and we can just have a chat in the old-fashioned way. There's a first question gone into the chat, which is from Ricky and Karen. Could a PPC, that should say, be more free to make a commitment than an MP? And I think that can be true. They're not kind of probably yet experienced being bound by party politics and worried that the media will pick up on everything they say. Might be more able to talk about local issues, but maybe not. I don't know. So I think the answer is yes, that is often true, but maybe not always. I don't know if anyone's got any other thoughts on that.
I just wanted to quickly come in there, Naveed. I feel like I agree with what you said, that it broadly might be true, but it also depends on who they are, because it really is just dependent on the person. Like I said, someone could be maybe the leader of a local council or something, and they're standing to be an MP, and they might be super busy. So it really does just depend on who the person is and all of their other commitments, really. But I would say broadly, yes. There was also another question. Can you clarify what a constituency mandate is? And that's a really good question, because I actually didn't explain that. And all that means really is that let's suppose we're all in the same constituency and we're all really passionate about the same topic. What topic could that be? Maybe clean water. We're all really passionate about clean water and like stuff to do with that. Then we all go and speak to our PPC or whoever your local politician, because constituency mandate can apply to any local politician. And then they've got that mandate behind them, which shows that local people care about this issue. And that's all that it really means. So if you go and you speak to your PPC about an issue, maybe you're part of a local group, like the example in one of the slides was Keep Suffolk Warm. I don't think that's a real group. I made that up for the slide. But if you were a part of that group and you went to go speak to your PPC, and that is you showing them that this issue is important and it affects local people, and it makes it personal.
I think another way of thinking about it, Tony, it's really the mandate is a sort of the sense of mandating on the issue that the politician subjectively gets. So if all of those people approach them, they feel like, okay, I can raise this issue because my constituents care. So I've certainly been in a situation where I've spoken to my MP, and he said to me, "Thank you for getting in touch with me and doing this this campaigning activity. I know you're very you care about it, and you've talked to me about this issue on the past, but it's really useful if I know that there's more people. Do ordinary people in this constituency care as well?" And in that case, I was able to say, well, actually, funny you should say that, because last week I was in the town centre and we got various letters from people who were just passers by, and a lot of people cared, and here's the letters that they wrote to you. So that's a kind of maybe a bit slightly more elaborate example, but it's that sense of mandate rather than it being any sort of specific technical thing. Does that answer the question? Let's open the mics if anyone's got any other questions on any specific aspect of that.
I think there might be one question that we missed.
Oh, sorry.
How much notice would you recommend we give to PPCs for our hustings event? I would recommend as much notice as possible, really, because I feel like that makes it easier to plan the event when you know that they're confirmed, and it gives you time to think of questions and everything. Don't know if you've got anything to add, Naveed.
I think it's quite yeah. I think that's obviously true. You're managing an activity and an event, and the more notice, the better. As soon as the election's called, they're going to be spending absolutely every waking hour out knocking on doors. So it's going to be quite hard to get hold of them. So the more you can get in their diary in advance, the better. That's super important. Of course, if there's already a hustings that somebody else has organised and you can just go along, that circumvents the problem. But if you're planning on doing one yourself, that is definitely true. the more the merrier. Oh, we got a question from Ricky and Karen. Do you want to just ask it, or do you want us to start answering it? I'm assuming that everyone can see the chat, but I'm not sure that everyone can.
Okay. So Karen's done some research already, so well done, Karen, and found out all of our PPCs, except that we haven't yet got one for the Conservative Party. So I'm wondering how much that matters. I mean, I don't think we're going to arrange a hustings ourselves, but there's all of the other reaching out to the individual PPCs and trying to influence them and getting to know them and so on. Should we just push ahead as much as possible with all the others and ignore the Conservatives until such time as they come up with one? Or is it worthwhile waiting till we've got a complete set, as it were?
I don't think it's top trumps. I think you could just go for it. But Apar, do you have a view on that?
I would think if it's not a hustings event, then I don't think it would matter all that much, really. Because from some of the sides, you can engage with them separately. For instance, like arranging meetings with them, but you don't need all of them to go to the same meeting. Does that make any sense? Like you can have a meeting with just one of your PPCs.
Yeah.
You could meet with them all separately, the ones that are currently announced. There's not really much you can do. Also, this might be the case for so many people across the country that they're not going to have a PPC from every political party. So I would just encourage you to engage with the ones that have been announced, really.
Okay. Yeah, that's
yes,
it.
I hadn't thought of that. Definitely there might be local reasons why one party isn't standing and you never quite know. So you could be wasting your time standing around when actually you could be getting on with it. It's really about being practical and getting in there before they get too busy, as I said.
And I guess it's still possible that the current government will surprise us all and, reach for a really quick election, in which case we need to have got all this done before that happens, don't we, really?
It will certainly improve your chances if you can. Yeah. If you can't, you can't. We'll find ourselves in the situation we're in, and that's, influencing and campaigning is a very much a practical thing. It's an art. There's no right answer. We're just trying to get in front of them as quickly and as efficiently as we can, and that's at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do.
Quite right. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Another point I wanted to make on that as well is that even if they haven't been announced, then it will later be announced. If you've already gotten, this is just an example, if you've already gotten all of the other PPCs to sign a pledge, then it can raise that issue. So when they do stand, then you can speak to them and say, I've got all of the other PPCs to sign this pledge or to agree to do this thing. And I think that can really help to raise whatever campaign ask or request that you've got.
That's so neat, Appa. I really like that. It's a great idea. Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted. Tony, did you want to ask your next question, or I can just read it out, whichever you prefer?
I don't mind, I can ask it. I wasn't meaning to be flippant when I typed this. It was just that you were mentioning about, that they'll be very busy and they'll be knocking on people's doors. And I thought, well, actually, is there a way to sort of handle if they do knock on your door? You're not going to have much time, so what would be the best use of the time if you've suddenly got them face to face in that one-to-one situation, I think.
Yes, absolutely right. In some ways, it's kind of ideal because you want to talk to them and they want to talk to you. So they'll probably ask you which way you're going to vote, and you might want to not tell them. That's up to you. But I would say some of the stuff that Apar was talking about earlier about preparing for your meeting, preparing your argument, your introduction, what you care about and why. Have a think about that. Some people actually have little cheat sheets by their door ready for when candidates come past, which I personally never done, but that's, you know, if they're going to, you know, try and get in touch with you, then that's perfect. That does half your job for you. I had an experience just 2 days ago. So I had been on a discussion about a similar topic to this. It was about one of our international development issues. I'd been on a Zoom call and I was quite fired up by it. And I thought, yeah, I really must raise this one with my own MP. And I went downstairs and there was some election material through my door. And it was a local Labour MP who's wanting to do a consultation. I was about to fill it in. I saw that there was an online version. So I went onto the QR code, did their online consultation and said, yes, I really care about this. I'm interested in international development issues. I'm particularly interested in global health issues. And basically, they want to know what people care about in their constituency. So I just bunged in that stuff. They're going to get loads of people talking about, you know, the state of the drains and the traffic and taxes and things like that, which is quite right. They're going to get fewer people talking about international development and climate and the environment, and that means that you're going to stand out. And they need to see that when they see their stats. So use whatever tools they've got to engage them. You know, I think personally.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
Jennifer, did you want to ask a question, or I'm happy to read it out?
I can ask it. I was thinking that if you write to MPs who are already elected, they normally have access to sort of party briefings and research and the party position, and can get statements from people who are in a position to know what they can implement. And I just wondered, although I engage quite a lot with existing MPs, I've only really started campaigning since the last election, so therefore I haven't really spoken to prospective candidates before. And I wondered, you know, how much access to the sort of party machinery do they have? And therefore, I was thinking about where you said they might be more willing to commit to things, but I was wondering, might they be a bit less willing because they don't have access to the party positions and knowing what they're allowed to commit to, and the confidence to do things on issues they don't know about? So, you know, are they kind of almost, I suppose it depends if they're an existing council leader or already in the party machinery, I suppose, but do you think they have as much access to stuff as sitting MPs?
Oh, do you want to start off on that one?
I'm not actually too sure of the answer to that. I'm sure that they have some access to resource and more information than obviously we would, but I don't know how much access to party resources that they would have. I think that their say obviously wouldn't be as big. I don't know. What do you think, Naveed?
I think that's right, but for me, it's a practical question. I think it's a great question. So I know that obviously the MPs, as you say, they have that access to the party lines on a whole range of issues, and if you ask them something they don't know about, they'll, I don't know what it looks like, but they'll search their party database or ring up central office or whatever it is, and they'll get you the off-pat answer. Obviously, the advantage of that is they can talk to you about the issue, but the disadvantage is you don't get a personal response, and then you have to dig deeper to get, well, what do you actually think about that? So I think the prospective candidates are likely to be more likely to give a personal response. But I also think the practical bit is, because it's an election, they haven't got that much time. I think the chances of them actually bothering to go and find out are much lower. I think they're going to wing it, which means that they're going to be more likely to have a conversation with you. Now, I don't think there's a right answer to this, and I'm sure all the parties do it differently in terms of briefing their candidates, and it depends on, you know, their level of resourcing. I can probably find out from colleagues who have been sort of researchers for MPs and been canvassing themselves, but I
think it sort of depends what the issue is that you're asking them for an opinion on as well. But
I think it very much
I'm thinking,
does,
for example, in a national issue. So I campaign on the cladding scandal, for example, which is a national issue in which you need a sort of concerted national response to it. Therefore, it would be helpful if they have access to lots of research. But if you're asking them something about a local issue, maybe it's better that you can get them in that frame of mind that they're more open to their own personal opinion. So I guess maybe it might depend on the issue.
yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. I think makeup and what? Hello?
There's a bit of a time lag now, Naveed. I was just quickly gonna say, if there's something that you can share with them and you're not sure if they have access, you can always ask or bring the material with you and have them read it as well. Yeah. You go ahead, Naveed.
Sorry, I think my internet connection went wobbly for a bit, so I hope I wasn't speaking over anybody. But I think what I was going to say was I think they have a sense of like what they can get away with making up and what they need to be a bit more careful on. So yeah, a sensitive national issue like cladding, they're going to need to get that right. If it's a local issue where their own personal connection with the constituency and they can make a bit more impact on talking about that, then they will. They'll kind of make that judgment on the spot. So yeah, it can kind of go both ways, but I'm sure they do have access to the party resources, but practically maybe not so much.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I wanted to ask people a question, actually. I mean, I don't know, the level of experience of people on this call in terms of, this kind of campaigning. You obviously all got the issues that you care about, but having heard a bit about the topic, obviously you thought about it because you wanted to come on this event. Does anyone want to share anything about how they feel about launching in with it? Because it also depends on whether you've got people around you or you're on your own, or how you're planning to approach it. But I'd be really interested to hear whether we've just described something that's so daunting that no one's ever going to do it, or whether some of it feels really comfortable and you feel that you can maybe pick up some of it. And you don't have to share, maybe you're still processing information, but I'd just be interested to see if anyone's interested in sharing how they feel about this kind of activity.
Yeah.
Go for it, Karen.
We feel very guilty because this was the results action for, I don't know, February or something. But we're actually now rather pleased that we haven't got started with it yet, because this meeting's provided really quite a lot of helpful tips before we start. So no, we're not daunted, quite looking forward to it now.
I have been to hustings before in a previous constituency. But they were very much a different affair because it was a very safe seat. I can imagine it could be good and more interesting here, because for the first time in my life I actually live in a constituency where it could go 3 ways, or at least 2 ways. So that makes it definitely more exciting. And
you can sense the buzz in the air in a constituency like that. When you go to the hustings, you can just feel it. It's definitely different.
Yeah. So the idea of actually arranging a hustings, that seems too daunting, but researching and writing to, and even possibly meeting candidates, that sounds
great.
That sounds doable.
Yeah.
Certainly having thoughts and ideas and questions prepared in case any of them come knocking on the door, which again they're more likely to hear because there's a chance it could go more than one way.
Yeah, it's a chance it'll be quite tight, actually.
Yeah. I've even got to decide what to vote myself. So it would actually be quite useful. Sorry?
That's another bonus.
It is, yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to share any thoughts about their own plans, their own thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have an interesting take on everything.
Please go ahead.
The area I live in, I've taken it on myself to teach people the importance of looking after where you live. Because that not only implicates the rest of the world, but it's such a brilliant place to start. I have been awarded by the local council for the work I do, but it needs to go further than that. But one point that everybody forgets, because I've been disabled all my life. I was born with polio, but I've run my own businesses up until, I do have support now, but up until a year ago, I had no support at all. I just survived. But there's an awful lot of disabled people that need support. One of the things that's come up recently is that they want more disabled people to work. Well, I work with a group and we help disabled people get access to work. But disabled people do want to work, and to combine this and all those people that are unemployed, people said years ago in the early 50s, it was degrading to make people do work in the community if they were unemployed. I disagree with that one. I will tell you a little bit about my case history because I think it's relevant. 17 years ago, I lost absolutely everything to fraud. I could have been somebody on the street, and when I had no money in the bank, I went and volunteered for a charity. From doing that, I became a manager for that charity. So I know that works. I think this is a great way maybe that could be used to get to MPs to say, look, this is a great way of looking after people's health. It's helping with the climate because we're teaching them what to eat and what not to eat. Nobody wants to be told what to do, but sometimes we need a push. I would just like to have everybody's views on this because I think there's several important points there that could be put across to MPs.
Thank you so much, Alexia. I just think thank you for sharing your personal story. I just think what you have done is incredibly powerful, and that is what we're talking about. If that is the kind of story, we've all got our own story, right? And then we're all different, but that is going to have impact on those politicians. That's why you care about the issue. That's just real privilege to hear you talk about that. And I think that is absolutely key to this activity being a successful one.
An interesting take on that might interest you all through an organisation that I work with. When we had COVID, we had a guy called Mandela come and talk to us. He lives in Uganda, who looks after 101 children. And he ran out of money because of COVID. And we all helped out, and we thought, is this straightforward? Because you hear of so many things today that aren't. So I can't think of his name at the moment. I know the guy who runs the Cocoa Foundation, who helps a lot abroad with supporting people. And he said, well, let me go out and check them out. So he went out there. And Mandela said, look, I don't want this money as a handout. I want these children to have a lifestyle, to be able to go to school, to have somewhere to live, to learn how to look after themselves. We bought them a farm. Those children are now going to school. We've nearly got the funds for them to have a tractor. It's becoming self-funding. And I think this is what is, not only for the politicians, but for the general public, is becoming worrying.
Yeah.
I have a blog out about this.
We really, really need to make that kind of point, that there's a connection, I think, on all of our issues, whether it be climate or other international development issues. You mentioned education, that we're all interconnected, aren't we? We all have some kind of connection to other people elsewhere in the world. And I think, again, you've just really highlighted that really well. So I hope you'll feel comfortable making those kinds of points if you contact your parliamentary candidates.
He knows who I am, and he knows I'll go after it.
Yes. I've just noticed in the chat that you're mentioning disability has also raised the really important point of, if you're going to raise the hustings, please make sure that accessibility is something you think about. Really important. We're going to have to round it up there. It's 8 o'clock. So thank you all for your contributions.
Just quickly wanted to clarify earlier, when I said clean water, I meant like clean rivers and bodies of water. I realized that I wasn't super clear. Anyway.
Yes, thank you.
So
that's a good
lovely
clarification.
Listening to everyone, and yeah, I'm really glad that we had a longer time for Q&A at the end. Worked out well in the end. Yeah.
It really did. So just a reminder of what we said we were going to do next. We're going to send you an email tomorrow. So unless you want to, data protection, we're not going to add you to our email list unless you're already on our email list. And of course, you can unsubscribe at any time. But we're going to send you a link to we can send you the basic information about how to undertake this activity, contacts you might want, where to go for resources, our contact details, and the slides. It will take us a few days then to follow up with the recording, should you want to re-watch this or share it with somebody else. We're going to be putting it up on our website, I think, but we'll send a link to wherever we end up putting it. So expect that, and if you've got any queries, you'll have had an email from me. Don't hesitate to get in touch, and if it's a PAR you want, I can put you in touch with her as well. So thank you so much, everybody, and good luck with your contacting your PPCs.